All right, welcome back. For this lesson today, we are going to be talking about the inference questions in the listening section of the TOEFL IBT exam. So for this particular question, if you are watching this video within the course and you have already gone through the reading section, then what you should know is that this question is basically the same thing as the implied or inferred meaning question in the reading section. Now, if you are watching this video on YouTube or you're watching this video in the Listening Skills Master course and you haven't gone through the reading section, well, that's maybe inspiration to upgrade to that course or to one of the full courses. But if you have gone through that, it's really the same thing, same style of question. The only difference is that you're getting the information from a spoken source instead of a reading source. So for those of you who haven't been through that section, just in case, we will quickly review the important details anyway. So for this particular question type, of course, you have to have the ability to focus, as we've talked about with the other parts of the listening section. Taking notes, that's incredibly important in this section. The intermediate level of English skills, this is important for the entire exam. Then the ability to discern information which was not directly stated. This is exactly what's being done when the person who is speaking is making an inference or what can be implied from what they are saying. So basically having the ability to get information based upon what the person has said, but what is not directly stated. So let's take a look at some of the questions so that's a little bit more clear in case you're not really sure what I'm talking about. So as far as an example, now you will always see in the question stem something like what is implied by, or what can be implied by, what can be inferred from, what does the professor imply. It's usually done in a lecture setting. So it'll usually be with a professor and giving a lecture. It could be with a conversation, but usually not with this question type. So that's what the question will start with. Here's an example. What does the professor imply about Edison's character? Okay, so with this question type, a lot of the answer choices, they follow the same type of structure. Obviously you have you'll have at least one answer choice which should be obviously wrong. But then one of the things that they like to do to try to trick you is to give information which was specifically mentioned, and it is true information. But since this is a question about implied information and what inference you have to make from it, even though it's true information, it's not the answer because it was directly stated. So you really have to find the answer, which is more of a summary. It's not exactly a summary, but it's written in the sense of a summary. So a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, if you have an answer choice which is very detailed, it's probably not going to be the answer. He was a great inventor. Well, that is a very broad statement, but being an inventor is not an aspect of character. So this is one where you could probably, if you don't know the answer right away, you could probably eliminate that one. He wanted schools to be named after him. So this is an example of one which is a little bit silly. Now, if you are living in the United States or have ever spent enough time living in the United States, you probably know that a lot of schools throughout the United States are named after him. So this is an example of one of those kind of silly questions, or silly answer choices. He was a pompous, arrogant, and selfish man. Now, pompous, arrogant, and selfish are all aspects of a person's character, so that very well could be the answer without really even referring to the notes. He had great respect for Tesla. This is probably an example of something which is a detail which was either specifically mentioned, or if you know the dimensions of the relationship between these two people, you probably know that they didn't really like each other very much. So this would be an example of an answer choice which they probably talked about respect, but it changes the information because it's not true. Now, one thing with the listening section, as you've probably already learned from watching the other videos in this section, but for those of you who are watching this video on YouTube and have not yet taken the course, with all of the questions in the listening section, you will actually get the question after you listen to the entire listening section. So you'll have to take notes on the audio file before you see these questions. So you'll probably have, or you should have, notes that you can refer to get the answer. But I just wanted to give you a demonstration of how you can determine the answer in addition to using your notes. If sometimes it's not very clear. So you can use other methods of finding the answer if you're still not sure. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the examples that we have here. What does the woman imply about critical reaction to the play Happy Strangers? Okay, so we have the word imply here. And another thing that I want to mention is that a lot of times with this question type, you probably won't be able to determine exactly the answer just by looking at the answer choices. You have to actually refer to your notes as well, because sometimes you have an answer choice that has some specific detail, but that very well could be the answer. You could also have another answer choice which seems like more of a broad statement. And usually with this question type, it's those summary type statements or statements that are a little bit broad are usually going to be the answer, but it also has to answer the question in the question stem. Because we're not doing a summary statement here, where it could be a summary statement, but it has to be in relation to the specific topic of the question stem. Here, the implication is about the critical reaction. So we're not making implications about anything else with the play, only about the critical reaction to the play. So you also have to look at what the focus is in the question stem. Like with this next one, what does the professor imply about the painting of the young woman surrounded by pumpkins? So if you've already listened to this particular example, you'll see that the professor is speaking a lot about painting in general, and then the painting about the young woman is only one example that he's speaking about. So the answer is not going to have anything to do with other things that the person spoke about. It's only going to be in relation to that particular thing. So that's one thing that you have to make sure that you pay attention to with this particular question type. So even though the answers usually are a little bit more of a broad statement rather than detail, that broad statement still has to be in relation to the main focus of the question stem. So as far as the official video, now you'll notice here that I have a notice about some of the things that they talk about in this video. They do talk about inference questions, and they give a good example of that, but they also add in some other information which I don't necessarily believe has anything to do with this question type, because they also talk about what will probably happen next. Now, I've never really seen questions that have that form. It's possible that this is existed in an earlier form of the TOEFL exam. I've never heard of this question type happening. I've never seen it in textbooks. However, they did put it in the video, so it's very possible that you could get a question like this. And of course, what will probably happen next, you do have to make an implication based upon the information that's given. So it could be an inference question, but it's kind of a different one here. And they refer to this as connecting information. All right. Well, yeah, you are connecting information, but connecting it to what? If you're making an implication about inferred meaning, then you're connecting information together to come up with your own idea. And the reason I think this is a little bit strange is because it seems to be obscuring what you're doing. So another thing about this question type is that a lot of the answers are going to be in the form of a paraphrase. So in the reading section, we also had paraphrase questions where they state something which is just another way of saying something else. So if the person said, like with the hummingbirds, okay, if you've listened to this file, then there was one part where they said, let's see, some groups of hummingbirds have changed their migration patterns. And in the example, the professor said something to the effect of, some of the hummingbirds do not follow the same route. Okay, well, if they're not following the same route, then it can be implied that they have changed their migration patterns. Those two phrases mean essentially the same thing. So this is not directly stated. It is implied. So a lot of times the answer could be something which was stated just using a paraphrase of what was actually meant. So that's one thing that you have to look out for with this question type. And really that's it. So you just listen for the information, make sure you take good notes, compare your notes to the question types. Remember that if it was something that was directly stated in the audio file, even if it's true information, that's not the answer. If it's something which is a detail that was mentioned but somehow changes the information, then that's obviously not the answer. So the answer is usually some sort of a paraphrase or a summary statement of something which was said. And that's pretty much it. So we will see you in the next lesson. If you are in the How to Answer or the TOEFL Dominator or any of the master classes, then we'll go on with the tricks and the traps. If you are in the TOEFL format course, of course, we'll see you in the next lesson with the next question type. But if you want to upgrade to any of the other courses, then you will get the tricks and the traps and the master skills and the additional information. But for everyone else that are already in those courses, we will see you in the next lesson.